speaking of shit that nobody cares about, the ever more confused look on Tucker Carlson's face and the weird security officer from Deep Space Nine, but with Rogaine look that Glenn Greenwald has. John Kerry reveals Biden as completely out of the loop on major submarine deal with Australia. Here we go. Let's see if that's the case. This is Glenn Greenwald, journalist. I think that there should be quotes around that, but we'll see. And this is called Who Really Runs the U.S. Government? Glenn Greenwald with Tucker Carlson. Who really runs the U.S. government? I don't know. Oh, and this ad again.
I just got my cashback match.
No.
Is this for real?
Yep.
We match all the cashback new card members earn at the end of their first year automatically.
That is weird. Money. Isn't that funny? Woo. Or whatever.
Match at the end of your first year, only from Discovery.
Stand that ad.
This for an awful long time. That would be Glenn Greenwald, who writes for Substack. He has been covering...
writes for Substack. You have a Substack. Substack's not a paper. That's like who writes for Medium. Who writes for LiveJournal. Yeah, I write for Twitter. What the fuck?
Security state for decades, saying things that in retrospect have proved to be totally true. We're happy to have him join.
No, they haven't. No, they have not. And he's the reason Snowden is trapped in Russia. Fuck him.
Glenn, thanks so much for coming on. So as just noted, you have been on the trail of the national security state long before most people thought it was anything more than a conspiracy theory, as we now say. Who do you...
The national security state is a conspiracy theory? In what way? Yes, the United States government and its people seek to have security through a security apparatus that is not 100% forthcoming, because anything that you and I know, all of our adversaries know as well, and only a fucking moron would want all your secrets out in the open, because you would just get all your citizens murdered.
I think is actually in charge of the government at this point.
It's bizarre, Tucker, because the Trump presidency brought so much evidence showing us who was. One of the video clips I always point to is when Chuck Schumer went on to Rachel Maddow's show days before Trump was inaugurated, when he had posted something criticizing the CIA for getting Iraq wrong. And Chuck Schumer said, ethics aside, how can Donald Trump be so stupid as to do that to the CIA? If you challenge the CIA, they have 6 different ways to Sunday to get back at you. And the entire Trump presidency was...
Well, that's because he wasn't saying about all presidents. They're saying that Trump himself has a lot of secrets that he's keeping from the United States, from the American people, that are a security threat in and of themselves. By the way, they never did. Just for the record, does anyone believe that the CIA doesn't have the ability to spy on Donald Trump, private citizen, or look into the life of Donald Trump, private citizen, before he was president? Does anyone believe the CIA couldn't do that? Anybody? Now, here's the thing. He shit on them while he was in office. Did they? Did the CIA attack him? Did anything that wasn't already in the works or legally available to the SDNY, did anything shockingly, surprisingly leak out through a CIA channel? Did the CIA attack the president of the United States or the former president of the United States at any point in this? No, they did not. All of this stuff is standard law and order, normal, like, searches and seizures, getting a warrant, looking at records. Like, this is all so fucking boringly normal.
All sorts of narratives from the media about how these heroic independent generals like Mattis and John Kelly and H.R. McMaster were going to save us from the elected president. And there were all kinds of reports about how these security state officials would conceal classified information that they didn't want President Trump to have in order to manipulate his decision-making, or even subvert or ignore his decision-making, like when he would tell...
Or be concerned that he was going to leak that information and get some of our agents killed, like he did with the Israeli agent that was murdered after he leaked information to the Russians when they came to the Oval Office. He became a security risk.
withdraw troops from Syria, and they would lie to him and pretend they did when they just moved them instead. And this was celebrated, while at the same time they would say, if you say that there's a deep state in the United States, which is nothing more than what Dwight Eisenhower warned about, a permanent power faction in Washington that rules the country regardless of the outcome of election, they would tell you that you were
Well, then why are you worried about the election? Why is anybody worried about the election? How does any policy change? The deep state, then apparently the deep state all during the Trump years wanted desperately to have this $3.5 trillion bill to pass and the infrastructure bill to go through, and then all during the Obama years, they desperately wanted to remain in Mexico policy and a wall and other shit.
like you were a conspiracy theory, even as they were cheering.
No, you're not a conspiracy theory. You're an asshole. What you mean is a conspiracy theorist.
For the classic definition of the deep state in the first place. So you have to be a conspiracy theorist or incredibly gullible not to believe that that exists.
No one is surprised that military commanders make judgment calls about information they pass along that can be incendiary to the conversation if it's not fully proven, for example, or they don't have actual engagement on it, or they know it will create an undue attention on something that might go south. So they make judgment calls. And those people, by the way, Mattis and others, were people that Trump chose. These were not installed bureaucrats. All the people he referenced, all these brave people that he's talking about, are all people Trump chose to run these organizations. These are not deep state people. These are people who have been in the chain for a while, but it was Trump's choice to move them up to the highest level of decision making where they would ultimately keep information from him because he's an asshole. None of those people qualify as deep state, even by this dickhead's definition. The deep state would be an automatic bureaucratic system that has almost nothing to do with the people who are installed by a president. Those people wouldn't have any control over it either. It's the deep state. I'm going deep undercover.
Here's the evidence that won me over. Famously, people say if you want to know who's really in charge, who you're not allowed to criticize. What's the one group Republicans and Democrats never criticize? The national security.
The national security.
I mean, Republicans are happy to go after the IRS or the education department.
Yeah, it's not you can't criticize the national security state or the apparatus. They have a committee that's both open hearings and closed door hearings to deal with that. But criticizing their failures and stuff, we've always been able to do that. I mean, let's talk about all the news stories that were done about stories about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, for example. Of course, you can criticize the intelligence apparatus when it fails. But what Tucker wants you to do and what Glenn wants you to do is criticize its existence. They want to criticize the very fact that America has an intelligence community, because this asshole wants the country to fall apart and doesn't like America in general and hopes it will be eaten by one of the countries he does like either Bolsonaro state or China or Russia. And this asshole thinks they're going to come after him one day because he's a paranoid asshole and he knows that somebody's looking into his BS behind the scenes and his talking to foreign leaders and using interview conversations to create business deals and give speeches in places like Hungary and shit like that. And he's nervous that some of his business deals might come to light. And so he's been panicking. Remember all that shit about their spying on our show? Remember that? What happened? What came of it? They're spying on Tucker Carlson? I mean, that was weeks we listened to this bullshit. Did any of it come of anything? Nope. Fucking had nothing to do with anything.
The last time a Republican leader meaningfully criticized DOJ or the Pentagon, and of course Democrats are exactly the same.
Meaningfully. Sorry, that's how you get out of Trump shitting on them all the time.
That kind of tells you everything, doesn't it?
Exactly. And
by the way, since the beginning of the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War, presidents on both sides have complained about the intelligence community or members within it and the truth or lack of truth or talking, like keeping secret, like black sites and all that kind of stuff. It was actually the subject of multiple debates about Abu Ghraib and torture and the information that Colin Powell went to the UN with about yellow cake and all that shit. We've been talking about this. Everybody has. This is in and of itself complete bullshit. Of course you can criticize him. Happens all the fucking time.
Amazing thing is, I mean, for whatever flaws you want to point to in Donald Trump's comportment and governance, of which I think there are several valid ones, one of the most important things that he did was he deviated from that cage that presidents have be kept in, which is he told the American people
that they have be kept in, sure.
These security state agents who think that they run the government, and he stood up to them and challenged their orthodoxies and pieties and showed Americans, especially people in the Republican Party on the right, that these institutions are not noble or benevolent, but are highly pernicious. They want to interfere in our domestic politics, and they ought to be deeply distrusted. I think that
we shouldn't trust our own intelligence community in general, because they are part of the deep state and they're trying to undermine democracy. I mean, they're obviously full of Antifa and Marxists, and they're trying to destroy America, and that's what they do. And basically every CIA agent who's ever died for the United States, spying on North Korean nukes, or who's been lost in battle, in Russia over the time, they were obviously, suckers who died for nothing, because ultimately SHIELD has been taken over by Hydra. What a bunch of fucking nonsense.
Most important things he did, and it was for that reason, his willingness to criticize them, that they hated him and spent 4 years.
He didn't criticize them. He didn't criticize the intelligence community. He just said he knew better than they did, and he didn't.
Undermine his presidency. And Tucker, the amazing thing is they always talk about the sanctity of democracy. How is democracy more threatened than having unelected people who operate in the dark, free to undermine and sabotage the person that Americans chose as their president?
Well, and how are they doing this? By forming the AUKUS agreement? Honest to God, name one of these fucking places. What are you talking about? Cite something. Just cite something.
Thank you. Exactly.
No, not exactly. He just said fucking nothing. He didn't say anything. Trump made the decisions he was going to make. The stuff that he was talked out of, like leaving Afghanistan, 2 nights ago, you were telling us it was a mistake to leave in the first place.
Want to wreck democracy, that's how you do it. And I think there's a lot of evidence the last president was really concerned about their power on a personal level. Like, he understood how...
Yeah, he understood how many crimes he had concealed, and he was concerned they would get a look at it. That was it.
Really quick, do you think at this stage it would be possible for a president to push back and to strip the unelected power centers of some of their power in our government?
You would need a big army behind you. I mean, that's why people in Washington were petrified.
Yeah, that's what we need. Is we need to declare war on the CIA and the NSA and the Department of Homeland Security. And probably the best way to do it is get a bunch of rednecks in trucks to roll up on the Capitol. You would need a big army behind you. Like, I don't know, the Chinese army, for example. You could find some enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of folks like Putin or Iran or Saudi Arabia, and maybe they could help you attack our own intelligence community. Jesus.
Hoover, he kept dossiers through the FBI on every politician in Washington. They do have a lot of amassed power. You need the population to rise up against them for that to work.
What the fuck do you mean rise up against them? Explain yourself. I mean, this is all fancy language. What the fuck? What are you talking about? What does this mean? I'm trying to get a grasp on this idea that, first of all, he cites deep state when he's talking about people that Trump appointed himself, and other people, like in the case of Colin Powell and the yellow cake stuff, someone that Bush had appointed himself. The only reason Trump was nervous about these people is because he's a paranoid lunatic who thinks everybody's spying on him, because he knows his past is full of crimes and ripoffs and fraud and bullshit and tax dodging and sexual assault. And he's afraid people will have, that the P-tape's going to come out.
Yeah, boy, I hope that happens. I
hope that happens just because nothing would make America fall quicker to a Chinese anti-democratic propaganda wave than us declaring war on our own intelligence community. Seriously, like nobody believes that everything that they've done over the last, half century of their existence in the intelligence community has been pristine, all good. There's been some various crimes that they've hidden, but the idea that those things were somehow examples of the evil pervasive in the entire thing and that they're running a shadow government is just fucking zeitgeist YouTube 2002 nonsense that none of them answered to at all. Again, what did Glenn bring up when he said deep state? Appointed politicians that Trump himself put in place. Not people that had been there for decades. They have never in any of this shit that I've seen gone, this guy has been a bureaucrat and he's been in all these different administrations throughout all of them. Wasn't appointed by anybody. Got hired at the DOJ. Got hired at the Department of Defense or at the CIA or something like that. Has always been there, and he's a section chief that nobody has even done a review on. And right, that would be the conversation to have. That would be a deep state operative, not somebody that a new president comes in, looks over some candidates, and installs him fucking self.
I think democracy is worth having. I know you feel that way too. Glenn Greenwald.
No, he doesn't. Glenn Greenwald isn't pro-democracy. Get the fuck out of here. Or he would have taken a vote on whether or not people thought that the information Snowden had should be released to the entire world, or it should be vetted by a committee so that they could release the parts that were valid for the American people to look at, or as opposed to releasing code that resulted in hackers being able to attack our infrastructure for months and months and months, and then they fly him to Hong Kong and then to Russia and fucking leave him there. Did any of us vote on Snowden being trapped in Russia forever? Anybody remember? Was that a ballot measure in your state? Because I remember, voting for people and supporting the idea of, say, Reality Winner getting out, when she did. And then ultimately Obama, I think it granted her clemency. Was it a full pardon or granted her clemency? And that would be part of my part in democracy. I wanted that to happen. The kind of people I vote for made that happen. There's a bunch of talk about, remember how Trump was going to forgive Snowden and Assange, right? And a bunch of lefties went over to vote for him because they thought this is the one chance they get, the Susan Sarandons of the world. We can collapse the whole system, and he's going to pardon Assange and Snowden and allow him to come home because he views them as enemies of Obama and not him and all that bullshit. Didn't happen. Did it? Did not happen. But that's what Glenn sold you. Fucking hell.
Anti-authoritarian, we're proud to have. Thanks.
Thanks, Tucker.
Thanks, Tucker. By the way, that's an insult. That's not his real last name. It's just something that everybody who's hung out with Rudy Giuliani now does, and they're all proud of it. It's part of a Tucker club. They're all Tuckers.